Hello, this is Charity, and we're going to be working on the 10 stitch blanket for loom knitters pattern today. So I'm going to take my slip knot and place it on my number 10 peg. And I'm just going to E-wrap for 10 pegs. Okay, so that's it. Now I'm cast on. And in this pattern, I used a U-knit. Of course, you could substitute it with a traditional knit stitch. And I'm just going to knit 10. This pattern does work as well if you do an E-wrap for your knit. However, since this was a conversion from a traditional needle knit pattern, I wanted to keep it with a more traditional knit stitch, not the E-wrap, which in needle knitting is known as either a knit through the back or a twisted knit stitch. So now back on peg 10, this is not going to be a turning peg. I'm going to go ahead and garter stitch. I'm going to go ahead and purl peg 10 all the way through peg 1. And this will be my first, I'll have knit one row and purled one row. And that will make one garter ridge or one set of a garter stitch. And I'm going to need to repeat that 8 more times so that I will have a total of 18 rows or 9 garter ridges. That will produce a square blanket, and that is how the pattern was written. However, if you prefer to make a rectangle, I would advise to double those cast on rows. Make it 18 ridges or 36 rows. And that's the only change in the pattern that you'll need to make to get it from a square into a rectangle. So once you've completed your starting square, go ahead and come back to the video and we will pick it up there on the first corner. Okay, so I have completed my 9 garter ridges or my 18 rows, and I'm ready to start corner part 1 or section 1. So I'm going to start out by knitting 9. And then I'm going to wrap and turn peg 10. So I'm going to pick this up, bring the yarn behind and in front of, place this back on. That's it for peg 10. So I've completed that wrap and turn. So now I'm going to purl back all the way to peg 1. And here we are at peg 1. So now I'm going to knit 8 and wrap and turn peg number 9. So I'm going to start out here, knit 8, and then I'm going to get to, see, peg number 10 has 2, so I'm going to lift peg number 9 off, place the yarn around the back and the front, and then I'm going to purl 8. So I'm going to purl all the way back to peg 1, and now I'm going to knit 7 and wrap and turn peg number 8. And I'm going to continue in this manner until pegs 2 through 10 all have the 2 stitches on them. And then go ahead and come back and we will work corner part 2. Okay, so each of my pegs, 2 through 10, I have completed the wrap and turn from corner part 1. And I wrapped and turned peg 2 and then I purled peg 1. So now we're starting on corner part 2. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to knit peg 1 and I'm going to knit peg 2 and I'm going to lift both of these stitches up over the 1 stitch. And then I'm going to come back and purl peg 1. So now I'm going to move on to the next row and I'm going to knit peg 1, knit peg 2. I'm going to move for peg 3. I'm going to lift both of these 2 stitches over 1, purl pegs 2 and peg 1. So I'm going to continue knitting down the row. Every time I get to the first peg that still has 2 loops on it, I'm going to lift the 2 stitches over 1 and purl back to peg 1. And you're going to do that same technique until all 10 pegs, until you've knitted off all of them and then purled back to peg 1. So now I have completed corner part 1 and part 2 one time along with the starting square. I want to pull this out just to show you. There you go. So now for this very first corner, and only for the very first corner, it's the only time that you'll do it, you're going to repeat corner part 1 and corner part 2 again. Okay, so I just completed my second corner 1 and corner part 2, and I'm ready to move on to the 10 stitch pattern. And this is the section we're going to be connecting to our starting square. So, oh, and by the way, I had to pull it off and move it down on this little tiny loom so that I would have room to use this starting square. Like I said, this isn't one I would suggest to actually knit a blanket on. But for this tutorial, I thought it would be fun. So we're going to knit 9. Okay. Now, we're at the starting square, and you can see this stitch is coming out. It's coming through right here. So that was your last one you worked. So right above that, you're going to grab the stitch and put it on. So now you have 2. You're not going to half stitch this. You're just going to put it in front, knit 2 over 1. Now I like to, right now, go ahead and grab my very next stitch. We're coming out here. The next one up is right here. You can see it on the edge. It sticks out and makes a bump. So we're going to grab that and put it back on this peg. Now we're going to purl back to peg 1. Oh, goodness. Sorry, bless me. Okay, and now we're going to knit 9. And then you've already got your purl bump on. So we're just going to go ahead and put the yarn there. Knit it over. We can see it right here. So the next bump that we have, this is the last one we use. So the next bump we have on the edge of our fabric is right here. We're going to take that, place it back on the peg. And I forgot to mention I'm using Lion Brand Amazing. That's the one I used on the sample in the pattern. And the one I'm using in here is the color Ruby. Or the colorway Ruby. I like it. It's a little darker than the one in the sample, but it's very pretty. So we're purling back to peg 1. And we're going to knit 9. Now you're going to continue like this until you get knit. Okay, you're going to continue like this, grabbing your purl bump and putting it back on your peg all the way until you've reached this end stitch here where your starting slip knot is. And then you're going to work corner part 1 and corner part 2. So that's going to turn this corner. And this next one, you won't have the purl bumps. You'll have your starting chain. And that's fine. That's nice and easy to find because it was just E-wraps. And you'll place those on. Then you'll work corner part 1 and corner part 2. And you'll begin working up this side. And every time you get to the end of a section where you've run out of purl bumps to put on, you do corner part 1, corner part 2, and then you just turn your fabric and you begin your 10 stitch pattern all the way until the end of that section, until you run out of bumps to put back on. And that's all there is to it. I hope this helps, and I look forward to seeing lots of beautiful 10 stitch blankets.